Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do a comparison of the book The Color Purple by Alice Walker and the two film adaptations that we have gotten so far, at least at the time that I am filming this. Since The Color Purple was published in 1982, Alice Walker's book has taken the world by storm. It won both a National Book Award and a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. It was rightly, I think, recognized as an American literary classic right from the start, although my feelings on Alice Walker herself are complicated. Please look at my deep dive on The Color Purple as a winner of the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for more information about that. It will be linked in the description box down below. But the short version is that Alice Walker has unfortunately used her platform to advance anti-Semitic and transphobic conspiracy theories in recent years, problems that are thankfully not to be found in The Color Purple, which is a relief. You just have to make the decision yourself about whether or not she is someone that you would like to support. And again, the link will be down below for more information about that. Anyway, given the success of The Color Purple, it is not surprising that Hollywood came calling almost immediately. All told, The Color Purple has been adapted for film, then for Broadway, then revived on Broadway, and then the Broadway adaptation was itself brought to movie theaters at the end of 2023. We are not really going to talk about the Broadway adaptation. For one thing, I haven't seen it. For another, I think focusing on the changes from the book to the two film adaptations will give us plenty to discuss without making this video unbearably long. The Color Purple is particularly interesting because this feels like an instance where the success of a book over time is at least partially due to shared cultural respect for a film adaptation. The biggest examples of this are, of course, To Kill a Mockingbird and Gone with the Wind, although I do not like the latter at all. For more information about that, I'll link my video about it down below as well. Now, be warned, there will be spoilers because I will be talking about the plot of The Color Purple in detail. So if you want to experience the book or at least one of the film adaptations first, that's fine. Just save this and come back to it when you are ready. I will also have timestamps in the description box down below if you would like to navigate to different parts of the conversation. I will also say that I'm going to skip a section about what The Color Purple is about just for the sake of this video. And again, I have already done a Pulitzer Prize deep dive on The Color Purple, so if you want more information about what The Color Purple is about, you can check out that video. It will be linked down below, or you can go to the post from my website that I will have in the description box down below, which is basically a full version of this video that I am doing right now. And it has a whole section about what The Color Purple is about. The quick version of it is that The Color Purple follows the life of a woman named Celie, a black woman in Georgia who endures many abuses and separations across decades. In the early part of the 20th century, she is separated from her sister, and the first half of this epistolary novel, she is writing letters to God where she shares stories and updates about her life, and then in the second half of the book, she realizes that her abusive husband named Mr. has been hiding letters from her sister. She gets to read the letters and figure out what her sister has been up to, and then she addresses the letters to her sister after that. And again, if you want more information about the plot, check out one of the links down below. Just for the purposes of time, I'm not going to get into it here. Instead, let's just jump to a quick thing about a brief history of The Color Purple adaptations. The first film adaptation was released in 1985, which was 3 years after the book was published. It was a box office success, and although there was some controversy about Steven Spielberg directing it, as a white man directing a movie about black characters and history, the movie was mostly a critical success as well. Roger Ebert called it the best movie of the year. Other critics, like Janet Maslin of the New York Times, were less convinced that Spielberg had been an appropriate match for such dark source material. Ultimately, despite the film's success, controversy, including protests from the NAACP over both the book and the film's representation of black men in particular, ultimately damaged the film's awards prospects. The Color Purple was nominated for 11 Academy Awards and did not win any of them, tying 1977's The Turning Point for the record of most nominations without a single win. We won't really be getting into the controversy from the NAACP here. There just isn't time. You can check out the film's Wikipedia page for a quick overview if you would like. Over the next 20 years, both the book and the original film showed strong staying power in American pop culture that led to a 2005 musical adaptation for Broadway, financed and produced in part by one of the stars of the 1985 film who had gone on to wild success in her broadcasting career, Oprah Winfrey. You may have heard of her. But though the musical was a success, critics were not wild about the adaptation. It was nominated for 10 Tony Awards and only won a single one for LaChanze, who played the leading role of Celie. Despite the mixed critical response, the musical was successful enough that it maintained a steady touring schedule even after it closed on Broadway. Most significantly, the first international production of it, which was staged in London in 2013, cast Cynthia Erivo as Celie. That version was very popular, and the show was brought back to Broadway with Cynthia Erivo 2 years later in a revival that was an enormous critical success, winning Tony Awards for Cynthia Erivo and winning a Tony Award for Best Revival of a Musical. This success is probably how we got to the second film adaptation, which takes the musical and brings it to the screen. A lot of people expected the new film to be a vehicle for Cynthia Erivo, who parlayed her Broadway success to 2 Oscar nominations, both for the film Harriet, one as an actress and the other for co-writing an original song that was featured in the movie. In the end, Cynthia Erivo decided to sign on for the film adaptation of a different musical instead, Wicked. Fantasia Barrino, who won season 3 of American Idol and replaced LaChanze on Broadway during the show's original run, ended up getting the part of Celie instead. Now, because the new movie has not been in theaters even a month at the time that I'm filming this, we won't know what legacy this new version is going to have. Only time will tell, but we can compare the new version to both the 1985 adaptation and the original novel from Alice Walker. One of the biggest challenges adapting The Color Purple is the question of how to make brutal subject matter palatable. Make no mistake, the things that happen in The Color Purple are brutal. The things that happen to Celie, Sophia, and other characters are really difficult to read about, and they're difficult to watch if you're seeing a movie. So there is a unique challenge here. How do you portray the abuses, assaults, and racist incidents without making it unbearable to an audience? The epistolary form of the novel actually goes a long way toward helping to keep the book palatable. Each chapter is a short letter that is roughly 2 to 3 pages long, meaning that details are fed to the reader in short bursts. There's no prolonged agony in the book. Film is obviously a very different matter. Scenes just work differently from chapters. So how much do you show? How do you frame the action so an audience doesn't feel brutalized? The 1985 film leans into a comedic sensibility that keeps a certain buoyancy for the viewer. It helps a great deal that the cast has great comedic timing and dramatic chops. Whoopi Goldberg, who plays Celie in the 1985 movie, was literally a comedian before she was cast in The Color Purple, which means that she is exceptionally good at finding humorous moments to balance out the heavier scenes. Oprah Winfrey, who was also nominated for an Oscar, can make you laugh by exaggerating Sophia's walk so it looks like she's literally doing a military march, but she can also break your heart when she confronts Celie about telling Harpo to beat her. And Danny Glover is really good at quickly going from making his character, Mr. Terrifying, to making him seem ridiculous as he pratfalls while deciding what he should wear to see Shug Avery. You can tolerate the heavy stuff because you're also being amused. The 2023 adaptation also has a comedic sensibility, and it is also helped by the fact that a musical by its very nature has a certain buoyancy to it, but it also shies away from showing the heavier, darker, and more violent aspects of the story. We know that it is taking place, we just don't really see it. It implies these things without showing them. If I had to choose, I would say that this is actually the weakest approach because it compromises the story. For instance, it does appear that the Broadway musical had a whole song about how mean Mr. is called Big Dog. There's another song where Mr. threatens to kill Celie if she ever goes near the mailbox. Neither of those songs are included in the movie, which feels like an odd choice because it doesn't get across how abused Celie is in her marriage. It especially feels weird when the movie does include a big choreographed number for Harpo called Workin', which doesn't really do anything to advance the plot of the movie, and it's a song that doesn't appear like it was even on the original Broadway soundtrack. As a result, the 2023 movie feels incredibly skittish about violent or unsettling content, which does harm the story, in my opinion. First, let's talk about what the 1985 and 2023 films have in common. The 2023 Color Purple contains DNA from the 1985 film, choosing to include several of the original Adaptations' departures from Alice Walker's book. More than anything, that really just goes to show how the 1985 movie is just as canon as the book at this point. People have loved the movie so much that it feels like audiences expect to see callbacks to it, even when those callbacks don't trace back to Walker's text. This is best illustrated by the 2023 movie incorporating Miss Seeley's Blues, or Sister, which was an original song that Suge sang in the 1985 movie and which was not in the original Broadway show. Here are other similarities. Building off of what we just talked about at the end of the last section, the book does not try to explain why Seeley never checked the mail or why Mr. was able to successfully hide Nettie's letters from her for so long, but both movies have scenes where Mr. threatens Seeley that if she ever goes near the mailbox. It's just a way of explaining why Seeley had a barrier to getting Nettie's letters. Next is Suge's father. The most significant departure from the book that both movies share is the idea that Suge Avery's father is the local preacher in the town where Seeley lives. It follows an arc in which Suge's pious father disapproves of her until they ultimately reach a reconciliation through song. Yes, even in the non-musical movie. In the book, Suge's family is elsewhere. She mentions visiting family in Arizona at one point, but they are never seen or remarked on beyond the fact that they disapprove of her lifestyle. It's assumed that Suge met Mr. while traveling as a singer, not because she grew up in the same town. This feels like a concession the original film made because Suge's family situation and the ways society at large disapprove of her being a woman with agency and a sexual appetite are things that a novel can get at without having them directly in the plot. They're a bit diaphanous without narrative feeding you the cues. Creating a plotline where a religious leader literally disapproves of Suge and having that religious leader be her father brings it home in a showier way the medium of film sort of demands. But the way these scenarios play out in both movies is different. And let's cover that real quick before we go to the next similarity. The 1985 movie shows that Suge is drawn to the local church, but she remains distant until a song battle of sorts breaks out. Suge is performing at Harpo's juke joint when the choir from the church begins to drown her out, or at least compete with her song. So she leads a group of people from the juke joint out to the church, belting out the choir's song to beat them at their own game. When she does, the preacher embraces her and reveals that he is her father, who has come to understand that his daughter has her own relationship with her religion. In the 2023 movie, the relationship is explicitly laid out early on, and the song battle is scuttled completely in favor of a much quieter moment where Suge quietly sneaks into the church while her father is playing the piano and singing a hymn. She joins him at the piano, and the two of them end up singing together. By the end of the song, her father gives her a hug, signaling that he has come to accept her. The quiet emotion of the 2023 movie's conclusion of this plotline is really tender and beautiful, but I do confess I missed the bigness of the 1985 scenario. It's interesting. It adds an interesting layer to the character of Suge. I don't know that we needed it, but it is interesting. The next similarity between both film versions is Suge's protection of Seeley, or lack thereof. One change that both movies made that I honestly find a little bit inexplicable is that in the book, when Seeley tells Suge that she doesn't want her to leave because Mr. beats her less when she's around, Suge immediately begins to protect Seeley. She agrees to stay until she has talked to Mr. to try to make sure that Seeley will be okay if she's gone. This is also the moment when Suge slowly begins to become disillusioned in Mr. to see that the man she initially fell for is not the man she currently knows. Of course, It should have been obvious that Mr. was awful to Celie, but Shug didn't see it until it was verbalized to her. Both movies have the moment where Celie admits to being beaten by Mr., but oddly, neither one has Shug do much of anything about it. It's a weird omission to me. I don't think it would have added much of anything to the running time, especially since the films find other ways to sort of address Shug protecting Celie. It's just weird to me that this moment is completely passed over in both movies because it's a huge admission. And it feels like it deserves something a little more in terms of a reaction from Shug. The next similarity in the way the movies handle things is Celie's children. In the book, when Celie and Nettie are separated by Mr., Celie tells Nettie to go to the home of the woman she saw in town with her baby. For one thing, she is obsessed with this family because they have her children. For another, it's the only safe harbor she can think of to offer her sister as her sister is being kicked out of her home. The movies skip this plot detail entirely, which is interesting because it wouldn't take a lot of time or explanation to get it into the movie. Instead, the movies lean onto the notions of fate or faith or coincidence. Nettie ends up in the house where Celie's children are either by divine guidance or utter happenstance. I guess it ultimately depends on which of these notions a particular viewer finds most compelling. Then we have family revelations and how they play out. In the book, Nettie learns the truth about her father and Celie's father from Samuel and Corinne, the missionary couple who adopted Celie's children. Once she admits to being the children's aunt, the missionaries tell her the story of how they got the kids, which reveals that Celie and Nettie's actual father had been lynched. The man they knew as their father was actually their mother's second husband. Nettie relays this information to Celie in a letter, and Celie drives out to visit the man she had known as her father to confirm that it is true. It's still not great, but it does mean that Celie's children weren't the result of literal incest. Then, when the father dies, it is further revealed that the home he lived in and the land he had kept actually belonged to Celie and Nettie from their mother, so they inherit it instead of his new wife. Being honest, this is an incredibly complicated process. It involves a lot of steps for the information to be revealed. It means that the information slowly drips out instead of coming all at once. You can get away with that in a novel, but it's death for a movie. So in both film adaptations, Nettie is removed from the process entirely, and the reveal about Celie's father and the land that he has been living on happens all at once. In both films, Celie finds out the truth about her father and who owns the house and the land he was living on after he has died, and his widow tries to settle his estate. It's just a lot simpler that way. It's not to say that the way it happens in the book is bad. It's just incredibly difficult for a movie to hit all of those beats. And I think that was probably a correct choice for both movies. We also have the abbreviated African segment of the book. Both movies save a lot of time by doing a Cliff's Notes version of Nettie's time in Africa, although the 2023 adaptation, I will say, does a better job portraying the white colonial issues, even in abbreviated form. But both save even more time by erasing the complicated dynamics that exist between Nettie, the missionary family she lives with, and the Africans that they meet. In the book, Corinne, the adoptive mother of Celie's children, is suspicious of Nettie because of how much Nettie looks like the kids. Eventually, Nettie tells Corinne and her husband Samuel the truth about her relationship to the children, and shortly after that, Corinne passes away due to illness. At some point after that, it's difficult to tell how much time passes in the book because the gaps between the letters can cover years. And since the letters aren't dated, you have to figure out from the context of what is in the letter how much time has passed. But anyway, at some point after that, Nettie and Samuel end up getting married. The 1985 movie hints at these complicated dynamics, including Corinne's death and Nettie's marriage to Samuel, but it doesn't focus on them. The 2023 movie skirts getting involved in these dynamics completely. Then there is a big one. It's the question of Mr.'s redemption. Another narrative that plays out too subtly to translate well to the screen is how the relationship between Celie and Mr. changes at the end of the novel. Once Seeley leaves Mr., her fortunes rise. She becomes a confident human being. On the other hand, Mr. and his fortunes begin to decline. When Seeley inherits her father's home and returns with her pants business, she and Mr. slowly develop a surprising friendship. He has come to see her as a human being, and he goes so far as to suggest that they marry again, but this time in spirit as well as in flesh. Seeley correctly refuses. First, because she's a lesbian, and second, because, absolutely not. But she does settle into a friendship with Mr., whom she begins to call by his true first name, Albert. Both movies lean into a more theatrical way of showing Mr.'s redemption arc. In the book, Seeley essentially puts a curse on Mr. when she leaves him, telling him that until he does right by her, everything he touches will crumble. But the novel doesn't treat this like a literal curse, even though Mr. does fall on hard times after. The movies sure do, though. They really emphasize the moment of the curse and that Mr. needs to atone in a big way for the many abuses he inflicted on Seeley. In the 2023 movie in particular, Mr. seems to experience near biblical misfortunes until he does right by Seeley. So the 1985 movie fabricated a scenario in which Mr. gets a letter revealing that Nettie and Seeley's children are unable to get back into the country unless someone intervenes and visits the immigration office and pays a hefty fine. Mr. goes in, sorts out the paperwork, and pays the fine. In the 1985 movie, Mr.'s role in Nettie's return is not revealed. His reward is to watch their reunion from afar, knowing that he did something good for Seeley that made her happy. The 2023 movie borrows this exact same plot development, but adds some flourishes to it. Mr. buys a pair of unwanted and discounted pants from Seeley's store as a show of good faith. He wears them to Seeley's annual Easter dinner and informs Seeley that he has invited some special guests on her behalf, leading to the reveal of Nettie, Seeley's children, and Seeley's grandchildren. The book just doesn't have a big moment to illustrate Mr.'s change and possible redemption. There's a somewhat murkier friendship and mutual respect between Seeley and Mr. at the end. Both movies lean harder into a redemption arc for Mr., using the same invented plot device to show that he's a changed man in the end, which makes it easier for an audience to accept a friendship between these two characters. Both movies also give Mr.'s father a much larger presence than what you have in the book, which gets to the idea that Mr.'s cruelty is a generational trauma kind of thing. It's hinted at in the book, but not really explored. The 1985 movie makes it a bit more overt, and the 2023 movie really leans into it pretty hard. And in a little thing that makes a big difference, both movies use title cards to tell you what year it is, which helps you track the passage of time. Again, the book doesn't use dates on the letters, which makes it really difficult to track how much time has passed between Seeley's letters at times. Let's talk more specifically about the 1985 film adaptation. The biggest difference between the 1985 movie and Alice Walker's novel is that the lesbian elements are almost entirely sanded out, essentially limited to a single scene where Seeley and Shug share a kiss. I've seen interview clips with Whoopi Goldberg where she points out that at the time, they filmed the movie in 1984 and it was released in 1985. It would have been impossible to portray a lesbian relationship in a way that would do justice to the book. That's not entirely true, but I do concede that it would have caused the movie to face even more potential backlash than it already was. As I mentioned, the NAACP was already protesting both the book and the upcoming, at that time, film adaptation for perceived issues in representation. Still, it's not necessarily that they couldn't include the lesbian relationship so much as the lesbian relationship would have been a barrier to the film being embraced as a mainstream, read, profitable movie. It's a movie studio problem, not a genuine wall that they couldn't have gotten over. Hi, Editing Greg is jumping in just to hammer in because Steven Spielberg has even said in the years since the movie was released that if he has a regret about his version of The Color Purple, it's that he didn't fight harder to include more of the lesbian relationship. So there you go. There is one thing I want to highlight that isn't strictly speaking a difference so much as a great example of a movie pulling a detail from a book and using it to perfectly encapsulate something that would otherwise be difficult to portray. In the book, there are one or two insults lobbed at Celie about her smile. Whoopi Goldberg captures Celie's insecurity and gets it across to the audience by having Celie repeatedly hide the lower part of her face anytime she smiles or laughs, or sometimes just because. It's a really beautiful detail that shows a fundamental understanding of the character, and it's just one of many reasons that it's a crime Whoopi Goldberg didn't win an Oscar for her performance as Celie. And while the 1985 movie dials up a comedic sensibility that makes the movie palatable, it really isn't afraid to be, well, terrifying either. It opens with Celie and Nettie playing as children, which seems innocent and sweet until you get a full look at Celie and realize that she is pregnant. The 2023 movie sort of borrows this setup, by the way. A horrific scene of Celie in labor follows, including the moment when her child is taken from her. The abuse she suffers at Mister's hands is painful to see, and the movie truly makes the scene where Celie and Nettie are separated every bit as traumatic as it should be. The 1985 movie follows up the separation with a scene in which Celie contemplates killing Mister with a razor while she shaves him. In the book, that only happens after Celie discovers that Mister had been hiding Nettie's letters. In the 1985 movie, the later scene after the letter revelation sort of mirrors an earlier moment. So you see the trauma that has been inflicted on Celie and sort of the reaction that she is having to it, and the anger and hostility that she is swallowing down in the fact that instead of only happening once, she really contemplates murdering Mister twice, and the two instances mirror each other. Lastly, for our purposes here, the 1985 movie shows the depths of Sophia's suffering after she is arrested by having literal scars on her face. There are a lot of other differences that I don't think significantly alter the story, like Celie's father remarrying early on in the story. For timing purposes, I think we should leave it at that. Now let's talk about what the 2023 adaptation changes. The biggest change is also the most obvious. It's a musical. I'm not going to focus on that. Obviously, when you have a musical, people break into song and dance all the time. And there is music in the 1985 version, and in the novel, Shug is a singer. So there's always been a musical quality to it. But when you make a literal musical, it's a big change. And we don't need to get into it any more than that. The next biggest change to me is something that I already mentioned, that the musical is much more skittish about showing violence or abuse. It's also much more shy about having characters be cruel to one another. We don't see how awful Mister's kids were to Celie after she moved in. I guess that would make it difficult to like Harpo later on. Mister's abuse is implied but rarely shown. And again, perhaps that would make it easier to believe his redemption arc later on. We don't even get to see Shug call Celie ugly upon first meeting her like she does in the book and in the 1985 film. It's almost as if the 2023 adaptation is trying to be polite or not to upset anyone too badly. I like the movie, don't get me wrong, but this is an odd choice to me because it does something to the story when you decline to really show the difficult or uglier aspects of what happens or the ways people treat each other. Another big change is that for some reason, the 2023 adaptation moves the action to the Georgia coast, so we spend a lot of time on the beach, which is pretty, I'm not going to lie. It's just weird when the story has always been landlocked before. Now, I've complained a little, so here's a good thing. The musical does not shy away from Celie's lesbian affection for Shug, and it shows the two of them waking up together in bed. There's a whole song and dance, literally, about Celie's feelings of attraction for Shug. It's glorious. But after that moment that they wake up together, the lesbian elements kind of fade away from the movie. So on the one hand, we've made huge progress. On the other, it's really weird that the lesbian storyline essentially disappears halfway through the movie. In an extension of how the film versions of The Color Purple handle Shug's reactions to Mister's violence towards Celie differently, in the book And in the 1985 film, Shug and Celie plan their departure for Memphis together in advance. In the 2023 movie, Shug springs the idea on Celie spontaneously, recognizing that there are tensions about to boil over related to Mr. hiding Nettie's letters. In a way, I guess you could say that it's a way of protecting Celie and a way of protecting Mr., but she definitely removes Celie from the house only because she sees that Celie is almost literally about to murder Mr. Another big difference is that while the movie shows Sophia's arrest and covers her years in prison and indicates that she will work for the mayor's wife as a maid, it omits the hard toll of those years as a maid on Sophia and how they effectively worked as a second prison term. The musical also largely omits the character of Mary Agnes, or Squeak as she is initially known. She's there. You know that she's with Harpo after he and Sophia split. She gets punched in the face by Sophia after trying to cut in when she and Harpo dance. And then she largely disappears until she decides to join Celie and Shug when they leave town, announcing that she wants to be a singer. Because you don't really know anything about her, when she says she wants to sing, it feels like a surprise, which is especially odd in a musical. You'd think they would find ways to allow Mary Agnes to sing, especially since they cast someone who has won an Oscar for a Best Original Song that she performed. You only see her one more time after she decides to join Shug and Celie, so a lot of her character arc is missing from the 2023 movie. It's very abbreviated in the 1985 movie, but you know her much more as a character. And as with the 1985 movie, there are a lot more nuances and differences. For instance, Celie runs into her infant daughter with her new mother while working in her father's store and not while she was out on the town, as in the book and the 1985 movie. In this adaptation, Celie only decides to make pants after she inherits her father's store, and so on. The only other significant difference is that this movie moves the conversation that explains the title to a much earlier point in the movie. In the novel and in the 1985 movie, Shug explains her views on religion to Celie later on in the story because everything that Celie has been through is causing her to have a crisis of faith. This conversation includes Shug's view that God doesn't like it if you walk by the color purple in a field without noticing it. In this version, Shug gives this speech not long after she and Celie first meet. Ultimately, it's fine. The conversation is still there, but it does lose some of the thematic resonance because, again, having the conversation come later when Celie is having this crisis of faith after everything that she has been through feels like more of a character progression than an introduction to a specific character. The last part of this discussion right now is which version is best. The answer is almost always the book, and really this is no different. The book just has more detail, more nuance, more characterization. That is almost always true when you compare a book with a film adaptation. It has all of those things because the running time of a movie doesn't really allow a movie to spend time on all of these beats and nuances. So if you are only going to engage with The Color Purple in one format, let it be the book. But again, just be aware that Alice Walker has developed some problematic ideas about Jewish and trans people in the years since the book was published. And again, there will be more about that in my Pulitzer Prize deep dive, which will be linked down below. As for the movies, each is good in its own way. I'm partial to the 1985 version because it captures the tone of the book better and doesn't shy away from most of the difficult parts of the story. Lesbianism aside, it definitely shies away from that. But as much as I've complained about the musical, it is a pretty good adaptation. I just prefer the 1985 version if I had to choose. The good news is I don't have to choose. I can read the book, I can know about how problematic Alice Walker is in today's world, and I can watch the 1985 movie, and I can watch the 2023 movie. If you have a preference in the version of The Color Purple that you like, I would love to hear about it in the description box down below. If you have thoughts about anything that I have said, I would love to hear about it in the comment section down below. And as always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.